been married for a few years. I remember when I said that once, somebody said, so when you say few years, what does that really mean? I said, well, you can start to count in decades. He said, well, how do you call that few? I said, well, I mean, you always see people who have married for 70, 50 years. And so the few is relative, right? And so we have had to go through some of the stages we try to describe, and just help us to understand the realities of it and some of the wisdom in it. I mean, life is in stages. Whether we like it or not, we were born there was a time when in our mother's womb, then we were born, we were infants, we became toddlers, we became teenagers, we became adolescents, we became young adults, we became adults, we're going to grow old. That's the way life is, and that's the same way marriage is also. It also goes through various stages. And each stage has its peculiarities, has its challenges, one thing that is very interesting is that, when you're in one stage, there's a sense in which you feel that the other stage is better. A couple of years back, somebody said that, you guys you are done. I said, what happened? He said, your children have left primary school. I said, what do you mean we're done? He said, because you don't need to think again about some things. I said, have you thought about it that the things you think about in secondary school could be more complicated than what you think about in primary school? He said, well, she's not yet there, so she doesn't even know. I said, okay, so just leave it. Enjoy where you are now. I mean, when you send your children to school and they graduate, people will call and say, congratulations, etibo, as they'll say in Yoruba, which means you are free. But at what point in marriage or parenting are you really free? There's no point, because each stage has its peculiarity, and those peculiarities determines the challenges you are going to face. If your child, for example, is still a toddler and you bought him a bicycle, you become concerned to ensure he doesn't fall down on the bicycle, right? And you start to buy him helmets and all of that. But if your child is riding bicycle in the house, what's the worst fall he can have on the bicycle? But when that child now becomes 22, 23, 24, and he gets a car, it's the same accident you are concerned about, but that accident has more consequences than the other. So you realize that at every stage, there are peculiarities that come of it. So if you allow me to also just generally say, generally marriages come in 4 general stages. Now, some people have argued it's 10, some people have said it's 7, but we can't just say it's 4. The first stage for us is the honeymoon stage. That's the stage during courtship and the early part of marriage where everything is lovey-dovey. There's a lot of romantic love. There's a lot of, you see the person as an angel. The person who has no error. He doesn't make mistake. Even when he makes a mistake, you provide explanations for it. You are totally blind at that point. You are blind to the person's weaknesses. You are blind to the person's inadequacies. We see it as a first stage. It starts just before marriage and the early part of marriage. Now, all of these stages are not defined by time. So we're not going to say stage 1 is 2 months or 3 months or 4 months. No. It's just a stage. So some of us are in that stage now, where maybe we are getting married next month, or you're getting married, or you just got married. You're still in that stage. Now, when you're done with that stage, you move to the next stage, which we call the reality stage. There are 10 things that happen in the reality stage. One is that you start to identify the weakness of your spouse. It's at that point you know that your spouse can snore. It's at that point you know your spouse does not know how to spend money well. It's at that point you know your spouse lies or exaggerates. Maybe it's at that point you actually know that your spouse is even actually not a Christian at all. It's at that point that you realize that your spouse might have had children before you got married. It's at that point you will start to have realization. So there is a realization part of that stage. There's also the pressure part of that stage. It's at that point you start to have children, and you have to deal with issues around picking children responsibility. Who should bathe the child? Who should stay with the child? Who should do this, do that? So that's the second. Is an awakening process. You are awakening to your partner, right? Because you are seeing your partner in a different light from what you saw initially. And then there's also added pressure from other people joining your life, in-laws, children, work, career. That's the second stage. It has its peculiarities. That's where you have the highest volume of conflict. And that's why they said most divorces happens within the first 15 years of marriage. Actually, I saw one study that says the crunch year is between the 3rd and the 7th year. That's when most people divorce, because that's when the reality sets in. And that set the stage for the next stage, So when those realities set in, then you move to the next stage of adjustment. The next stage is that point of, okay, my wife does not know how to do this. My husband does not know how to do this. I need to adjust. Now, some people will adjust by moving out. I mean, and if you have been a marriage counselor, and thank God we have been for a while, there is no reason you can't hear people choosing to divorce their wife or their husbands. Somebody will say, I divorced my wife because she doesn't know how to manage money. And I'm like, if everybody divorces his spouse for that, I'm not sure many people will be married in this world. Because in every home, somebody doesn't know how to manage money. It's the way it is. It's the balancing that happens. People will say, I'm separating or divorcing from my wife or my husband because she's dirty. And I hope sometimes that, what does that really mean? And if you say it's dirty, is there anything you can do to be clean? Because if you say you are divorcing your wife because she doesn't know how to clean the house, hey, you got two hands, right? And you're not disabled. Why don't you clean the house? Some people will say they're divorcing. So it is that touch stage of adjustment that we need to either do a couple of things. Do you want to accept your spouse the way it is? People will say, okay, you people have been married for a long time. What are the secrets? And I keep telling people there are not many secrets, but part of the secrets is acceptance. You just need to accept who you married. So if your wife is, my wife is taller than me, right? I need to accept it. There is nothing I can do. Or is there anything I can do about it? There is nothing I can do.
Where are you?
Okay, she said I should wear a. Okay, so I just have to accept it. My wife, for example, enjoys more watching films than I. I don't necessarily like to watch films. I just have to accept it and find a way to go around it. I mean, and sometimes join them to watch films, or not. I like to. I'm slower than my wife in terms of pace. So, for example, my wife struggles to understand my slow pace. If the house is not on fire and nobody's dying, why are you rushing? That's my own philosophy in life. Everything will fall into place. So don't rush life. I believe that strongly. So she's faster paced. She takes decision faster than I do. So, for example, if one say, "What do you want to eat?" I do not know why that is a decision I need to make quickly. So my first answer is I don't know, because I'm still thinking. She is ready to, at the point she's saying, I am hungry. She has already decided what she will eat. I no, no. Some of us are not like that. We have to go through various processes, analysis, synthesis to determine any small decision. So all those adjustments are the things you do at that stage. Now, the differences could be so much that you think that the solution is to leave the marriage. But the question is that if you leave the marriage, what's changed? The person still remains where it is. A friend of mine said she wanted to divorce the wife, and I said, "So what's your long time plan?" I said, "I want to marry another woman." I said, "I don't get it." I said, "You are leaving the woman because of some things. Now you want to marry another woman." Say yes. I said, "So that new woman you will marry, that one will not have any weakness, will not have any liability." He said, "No, I will look very well this time around." I said, "So you are saying it's because you didn't look well?" So at that stage is when we need to ask ourselves. And for me, I think the biggest thing we should do at that stage is to accept one another and look for a way to leverage our skills, our strengths, our weaknesses. So there's certain things for us, for example, in decision making, there are certain things that she decides because, hey, all the options are good and speed is of essence. I mean, so it's also at that point where you need to start to share powers and responsibilities well. So where speed is of essence and I'm not as fast as she, then she can take that decision. But where analysis and the implications could be more long term, then we may need to sit down to do that. So that's the adjustment stage. So it's either you do three things. One, you either accept your spouse. Number two is either you resist and you spend time fighting. I mean, there are people that still fight over they should use Ajinomoto or they should use Maggi cubes or they should use nut to make food. I mean, how long do you want to fight over such things, right? So you either want to accept, you want to resist and spend all your time wasting time fighting, or you want to have compromise situations where you agree that in this issue, I know I'm not going to win. And honestly, you can't be married for a long time without compromising in some areas. It's just a reality of life. And that's part of one of the things that God used to groom us to become more like Him, right? And then the last stage is the stage we call the final stage, and that stage is the result of what you did in the soft stage. So if you have chosen that you will fight, some people will say, I will not accept this and I will stand my ground. You have just signed up for a life of fighting. You will fight for long. and you will be tired, right? Some people will say, okay, do your do, I do my do. Okay, my solution is that I live separate lives. It's okay if you think you're doing that. Maybe you're 35 now, you're living separate lives. You may think that's the best thing to do. But remember, by the time you are 70, you are 60, by the time you are becoming physically not as strong as you used to be, each of you will understand the implication of what you have done, because now you may not really know the implication of what you have done, right? So it's at that stage that you need to be very conscious of that. Remember, marriage can be enjoyed depending on how you respond to each stage, and each stage has those peculiarities. Now, many of the people here are immigrants or would be immigrants. I saw a study that says that is it 60 or 70% of Nigerians would love to leave Nigeria. So what that means is that 1 out of every 10 Nigerian is a potential immigrant. So it's a fact of life. And for those of us that are Christians, part of the determinants of those stages is immigration. So, for example, if you are in stage 2, for example, where you are where you're just realizing the peculiarities of your wife, okay, so you got married and maybe a year after you relocate, part of what you will be realizing in that stage 2 is how your wife or your husband that behaves in Nigeria compared to the way the person behaves in Canada or the UK or the US, as the case may be. So, marriage can lengthen some stages, can make you repeat some stages, right? So, for example,
Immigration.
yes, sorry, immigration. So, for example, you are in stage 3, where you have, for example, decided that I want to adjust, and then you now move to Canada, right? You will go back to stage 2. Why? Because the changes in Canada will make you need to come to that reality stage. So you come to Canada now, you realize that in Canada, the idea of having house helps, drivers doesn't happen. And then you suddenly realize that your husband doesn't like to drive. You used to think in Lagos that your husband is doing big man, or that's because you have driver. You don't know some weaknesses of your spouse if you have house help. It's now you realize that sweeping daily is not, some people are not called to sweep daily. It's that time you realize that some people don't have a ministry to cook regularly. Some people will say, in Lagos, I used to eat fresh food. The soup I eat must be made that same day. When you come to Canada, that cannot be part of your destiny any longer. So you go back to that stage too. So we need to talk a bit about it. And then my wife will then speak for a couple of minutes, and then we'll take questions. So marriage is a reality. Immigration is. Why am I talking about marriage? Is it because I'm sitting beside my wife? Immigration is a reality, whether we like it or not. Many people want to migrate. And immigration or migration is not man's idea alone. It's also God's idea. If you check the story of the Bible, there were people God specifically told to migrate. God told Abraham, leave and move somewhere else. God told Joseph and Mary, leave and go to Egypt. So there were very many God-initiated migration stories in the Bible. People planned. So, some people will say, a pastor wrote recently that many Nigerians who are Japa, Japa is a word for migration in Nigeria, that why don't they ask God before they Japa? So I asked that, Pastor, why don't you ask them to ask God to whether they should stay in Nigeria? Because, there is a sense in which we always ask people to ask God to move. But you also need to ask God to stay. Because God's plan for you may be for you to stay. God's plan for you may be. So when we want to create fear and make people not to move, or when we are afraid of the move, we say we are asking God. But if the question is, God, should I stay? I mean, if you check the way David was always asking God, should I pursue? Question. Will I recover? Question. Will I? So he asked a question in such a way that it was clear what God wanted him to do, for example. So Mary and Joseph was a clear case of God saying, in their own case, in the case of Abraham, God didn't say where they should go. He just said, leave. Somebody said, so if you say God didn't say God wants you to try to relocate, did he tell you to go to Canada? And then did he tell you to go to Manitoba, Gabon? And then did he tell you to go to Winnipeg? I mean, God did not tell Abraham that. So there are people that will follow the Abraham method and they will just move, right? And it is where they get visa, they will go. Don't that was what happened to Abraham. Abraham touched many countries before he finally settled where he settled, right? But in the case of Mary and Joseph, because there was a prophecy that was given, the prophecy was given in the Old Testament that this son shall be called from Egypt. So it was clear that God had to ask them, go to Egypt. It wasn't as if they couldn't have ran to other places, but because there is a prophecy. So that was why it was that clear. So if you're asking yourself, yeah, maybe you're saying Nigeria, you are saying, I'm not clear where I should go to, it's not clear. You are cool. Maybe you're Abraham of today. And if God tells you go to Manitoba, when you go to Manitoba, go to Winnipeg. When you go to where, go to Winnipeg Street. Look for house 204. Like God told Ananias, no, like God told that person, what's his name? Cornelius. Send somebody to a house called Street, and you know all those, like you told Paul. Some people are like that. So don't kill yourself if you don't have that information. Now, migration has implication for your marriage. I've said that. And so ask yourself a couple of questions. Do you want to migrate simultaneously with your spouse? So we're just asked like 5-6 questions at this point, and then my wife will take over, and then she couldn't again. You must ask yourself, am I living with my wife? Abraham left with his wife. So, some people will say, it's my wife that first got the student visa. Let her go, that will come 3 months, 4 months after. Is that what you want to do? Each of them has implication. Depending on the way your marriage is, the kind of money you have, you can then ask yourself, which one pays you better? Number 2, do you want to migrate first and then your wife joins you? It's related to number 1, but it's different. You know that when Moses was leaving for the promised land, his wife started the journey with him. Remember, the Bible says they had an encounter in which the Bible said God wanted to kill Moses because he did not circumcise Gershom, and it was the wife that intervened. So there is a lesson there that it pays you to migrate with your wife. But there is a risk if you carry your children along. Because God wanted to kill Moses because of the children, not because of the wife. So if you have toddlers, for example, and you want to come to Canada and you come with 2 or 3 toddlers, you know what you're signing for. It's going to be tough. I mean, let's be very sincere with it. Now, so Moses, after that incident, till we got to the promised land, we never heard about that woman. And actually, historians have said after that encounter, Moses sent the lady back, and Moses went to the promised land. Remember, it was later in the book of, later in Exodus, that Jethro brought his wife back to him. That's the Bible, the way the Bible says. So there was a gap in the immigration story of Moses where the wife was not present. So do you want to follow that model? Do you want to land with your wife and send your wife back to Nigeria? It may make sense in some context. Number 3, do you have a clear purpose for migration? Do you have a clear purpose? For Mary and Joseph, it was clear. Take your child to this place because somebody that wants to kill you is there. And then when the person died, they came back. So it was a clear message. Mr. A wants to kill you, run away. Once Mr. A was dead, then they came back. So if you said God said, I should go abroad because of the fact that I don't want to live in Nigeria with Muhammadu Buhari, he leaves office in May 29, go back to Nigeria. If that's the reason why you came to Canada or the UK, right? So ask yourself, do I understand, number 5, do I understand the country you are migrating to? I'm going to share a story here. I mean, it's a life story. I was talking to a couple that just immigrated to Canada, and I told them that I need to let you know this. In Canada, the Canadian social power dynamics is built around the woman. I said, so you will realize that your wife will likely get a job before you, and your daughter will likely get a school before your son. I said, so don't fight it. It is the way this Canada is structured. Some other countries are not structured that way. A couple of weeks down the line, the wife got the job. The husband didn't get the job, right? A couple of days after, the daughter got to school. The son didn't get to school. So I called them. I said, do you remember I told you when you came? I said, because many Nigerians show up here in Canada and they are struggling why their wife is the one flying and they are not flying. It's part of what you need to understand. This country I'm going to, who has a better chance? Who should go to school? Who should go and work? And then related to that is the 6th one. Am I willing to adjust to the cultural realities of that place? That includes who washes plates. Some men, their destiny does not include washing plates. The inside their full destiny, when they downloaded it in Nigeria, washing plates, washing toilets is not part of it. Are you willing to adjust? If you're not willing to adjust, stay back in Nigeria and all of that. And maybe the last question before my wife takes on is that, is your relationship strong enough to withstand the stress of marriage? So it's the stress. I keep talking about marriage. Maybe I should go and stay behind you, and that's my high will be clear at that point. All right. So Are we in that? Are we stronger? No, because if you're struggling together in Nigeria and you want to have the complications of migration and immigration to it, it will make things worse because now you're adding another layer of complication. Remember, I said if you're in phase 3, you go back to phase 2 if you migrate, right? So are we strong in phase 3 that going to phase 2, we spend a short time, we're back to phase 3? Or you are struggling, or maybe you are struggling with trust. You don't trust your husband, your wife. You now tell him to come to Canada, we'll come and join you later. Hey, you want to get into trouble, or you know that your husband is a strange person when it comes to sacrificing you, right? I mean, he's willing to do anything. I mean, and he has mentors in the Bible. Uncle Abraham, who told the wife to lie so that they can get visa. Same thing as Brother Isaac, who told the wife to be able to get stay in those two countries. There are men that tell their wives, for example, that she should do arranging marriages so that they can have a stay. If you know your husband is somebody like that while you are back in Nigeria, why do you want to go into immigration? He's going to sacrifice everything to get there, and your marriage will become permanently damaged as a result of that. But if your marriage is strong enough, then you can allow it to happen, and then you can enjoy the best out of it. Whatever is real, whatever is works best for you, just do it. But the point is that don't allow immigration to mess up your relationships. Don't If it's not working, hey, immigration is good. It's great to live in a foreign country where things work, but your personal life. I mean, so if you live in Canada or the US where things work, but your home is not working, what's the point? I mean, so why don't you Canadalize your family first before you go to Canada, right? If the reason why, people say, I want to go to Canada, things are working, there is less stress, there is less tension. Okay, I agree with you. But you can import those values into your family first, whether you're in Nigeria or you're in Canada or you're in Cameroon or you're in Gabon or you're in Congo. Create that same value in your family, then move there to enjoy it. But it's stressful for you to move to Canada and you lose your family. I don't know how many people I've had to talk to whose wife has chased out because they moved, and that might not have happened. So over to you, man.
Thank you. Okay, so I will be doing a lot of question. I mean, I hope there will be question, but the angle I want to touch on is the enjoying God through this life season. So how do you enjoy God in all of these phases of your married life? When you are in the honeymoon stage where everything is cool, you guys are doing lovey-dovey and all, is that a time to start to withdraw from God's activity? Like, oh God, you gotta understand, I just got married, so I need time to build my marriage. So because you want to build your marriage, you need to sacrifice your commitment to God. You don't serve in the church anymore. You stopped going for choir meetings, and you just, because really things are good and you really don't need God. Or even based on this immigration stuff, because you immigrated now, the things that used to be prayer points before are no longer prayer points. You no longer pray that, oh God, let there be light when I get home. That one, there will be light. You never used to, just certain prayers you used to pray before, you don't pray again. So because a lot of your needs are met already, you don't need God anymore. Like, God, you understand now, life is cool. So let's just keep things chill. So how do you want to ensure that all through your journey in life, God remains the center of your life and God remains the focus? That you don't, because of pleasure, move away from God, neither because of pressure, move away from God. You are not saying, because we got married 10 years ago, we still don't have a child, then that means that God should just go and sit down in one corner. So when the challenges of the married life comes up, Are you still valuing your relationship with God in all of this? Things can happen in marriage that will make life not to be enjoyable. For example, people who have children with special needs. So if you have um a child that has autism, for example, and it's really, the child is very high on the spectrum, that child will, the attention you will be giving that child is going to be like the attention you are giving to 3 or 4 kids at the same time. That can seriously stress the marriage, and it can seriously stress, make you to not even have time for God again, because you will say God can understand. This one child is like 5. So how are you supposed to still ensure that this will not be an excuse for me, even though it may be valid, but His grace, that is God's grace, is always sufficient, and we should ensure that we don't draw back. What if you fall into financial challenges? Sometimes people relocate and they have to take on jobs that are lower than what they had before in their country of origin, and their income has reduced. I have had to work with couples that, in fact, there is one that the guy said that since they moved to Canada, that the wife really doesn't want to work. Why? Because back home in Nigeria, it was the wife that was working as the breadwinner, because the guy lost his job. So now they have come here, the guy has a job, and the wife said, me, I will not work. It is your own turn now. It's your own turn to carry the load I have been carrying. And that singular mindset is stressing their marriage, and that's why they are in counseling, because it looks like, okay, now, shebi me, I have done my own part. You to start doing your own. So couple can have financial challenges. You still need to make sure that you are still seeing God all through this season. God will never have to take a back seat, all because of your own stress or the challenges you are facing. Your marriage, make sure that both of you are working together as a team. Teamwork is very, very essential. If you don't see yourselves as partners, as teammates, you see yourself as Lord and servant. There are some mindsets like that you just feel like, because you are the man, you are the master. Then the wife is supposed to be the staff, or the your subordinate, like, I call the shot because I'm the man. And I always say that, see, that is not going to work. It's not going to work, because if you don't see each other as teammates, you are not going to respect each other. You are not going to even, listen to God, to even work together in partnership with God, because you, the man, will just feel like, I know it all. I am the only one that is spiritual. I'm the only one that can hear God. I'm the only one that is smart. Meanwhile, you're just bubbling yourself. So let's make sure that we factor in God all the way, whether things are smooth, whether things are challenging, whether um whatever season you are, is the honeymoon, things are rosy. When you are in that resistance stage where you are fighting, where you are trying, everybody is trying to mark their territory, they are going to say, me, I will not take this, or you will not take this. So please seek help. It's good to pray, but also seek professional help, because sometimes your prayer self is a self-centered prayer. You are praying. When I meet couple or anybody that say, okay, have you prayed about the situation? Say, I'm praying. So what are you praying about? Can you tell me the prayer point? The prayer point is likely to mean, God, this my husband, fix him. This my wife, fix her. It's not likely to be, God, help me be better. Help me. So we kind of always feel that it's the other person that has the problem, and it can't be you. So seek help. Don't just keep fighting, badging each other up until you now say, I can't take it anymore. Relocation should not be a cost to you. It shouldn't be a cost. Your marriage was working in Nigeria. Now you have relocated. You are now divorcing because you live in a country that supports women's rights. And once you go and shed one small crocodile tears like this, they will help you send your husband out of the house. That can't be God's will for you. So this relocation thing shouldn't be a cost. It should be a blessing to you if indeed God wants you here, or wherever you are. So we encourage you that stay together and make sure that you don't draw away from God. Whether you are enjoying pleasure or you are facing pressure, let God be the center of your home.